ChatGerry, a 36-year view of cancer risk as a slow internal process, number 1478, VPT Sharp 039, December 25, 2025. Gerald C. EclaireMD Foundation. Category, Cancer. Preface, my purpose. I am no longer writing for academic prestige. That phase of my life is finished. After decades in Silicon Valley, I have already experienced recognition, power, and wealth. None of that motivates me now. What matters to me is helping ordinary people understand their health early, enough to change outcomes. I write for patients, not for journals. I deliberately avoid medical language whenever possible because most people suffering from chronic disease will never read a medical paper and should not need to. I believe clarity saves lives, simplicity reaches more people, knowledge gives patients back a sense of control. This is why I publish my work in written form with simple audio narration on YouTube. No flashy visuals, no entertainment, just quiet explanations that people can listen to while resting or living their daily lives. My work is not anti-medicine, it is pro-prevention. Modern medicine saved my life more than once, but prevention requires understanding root causes, not just treating numbers after damage is already accumulated. At age 79, having survived 9 life-threatening events, including a recent stroke, I know my time is limited. My research pace is driven by urgency, not ego. My body has been my laboratory for over 16 years, generating more than 4 million data points. What I share now is public service, not academic output. Introduction. How I see cancer risk. I do not see cancer as a sudden diagnosis. From a biological and physical viewpoint, cancer is the late result of damage that has been quietly building inside the body. For decades, this study looks at cancer risk environment, not cancer itself. I have never been diagnosed with cancer. Instead, I examine the internal conditions that make cancer more or less likely to appear over time. Using 36 years of my own data from 1990 to 2025, I studied how cancer risk evolved in relation to 4 major factors: obesity, type 2 diabetes, vascular damage, and health age. I used physics-based and geometry-based tools to understand long-term damage accumulation rather than short-term lab values. What was measured? I divided my life into 18 biannual periods and treated cancer risk as a strain proxy. This means I did not measure tumors. I measured internal stress conditions. Higher strain means a body environment that favors cancer development. Lower strain means a more stable internal environment. 4 stressors were selected and studied. Obesity represented long-term excess energy load. Type 2 diabetes represented chronic glucose toxicity. Vascular damage index represented vessel stiffness and calcification using pulse pressure and mean arterial pressure. Health age represented biological aging influenced by lifestyle and disease. All 4 stressors were normalized so changes over time could be compared fairly. What drives cancer risk most? From both physiology and statistics, cancer risk does not come from one factor. It comes from long-term interaction among metabolism, circulation, and aging. In my cancer risk analysis, type 2 diabetes was the strongest driver. Chronic high glucose damages blood vessels, mitochondria, immune surveillance, and cellular repair. In my VMT energy results, my type 2 diabetes contributed about 41% of total accumulated damage energy. This makes glucose toxicity the main accelerator of cancer risk environment. Vascular damage was the second strongest contributor at about 23%. Once vessels stiffen and calcify, oxygen delivery becomes uneven. Hypoxic regions form. These conditions favor abnormal cell behavior. Importantly, vascular damage does not reverse even after glucose and weight improve. This explains why late life risk remains elevated. Obesity contributed about 20%. It acts as a background load that sustains inflammation and metabolic stress. It is important but not dominant by itself. Health age contributed about 16%. Aging amplifies damage but does not create it on its own. It makes existing stress more harmful. Together these 4 factors explain why cancer risk builds silently over decades, why late improvement is limited. Using viscoplastic energy analysis, I found that most irreversible damage accumulated earlier in life. By around from 2014 to 2015, more than 95% of total lifetime damage energy had already formed. After that point, lifestyle improvement slowed further damage but could not erase the past. This explains a common frustration. People improve their habits later in life yet are told their risk remains high. Physics laws and engineering experiments explain why. Past damage leaves structural memory. A fluid flow view of cancer risk. From a fluid dynamics viewpoint, cancer risk is not a sudden event. It is slow flow degradation. Diabetes thickens metabolic flow and increases internal friction. Vascular stiffness damages flow channels and removes. Shock absorption. Obesity raises baseline resistance. Aging amplifies every stress. Over time, a smooth, resilient system becomes strained and unstable. By the time cancer is diagnosed, the flow damage has been present for decades. Topological geometry confirms the same story. When I mapped obesity, diabetes, and vascular damage in a geometric space, the system did not return to its original shape even after improvement. Early years were dominated by severe diabetes. Later years showed better glucose control but persistent vascular damage. The geometry changed shape but preserved memory of past stress. This is what topology shows clearly. History matters. Final message. Cancer risk is not a sudden accident. It is the final expression of decades of metabolic overload, vascular damage, obesity, and aging acting together. This study does not include the influences of genetic or environmental factors. Once damage energy accumulates, it cannot be undone. It can only be slowed. The most important lesson is simple. Early metabolic control matters far more than late correction. I share this work to help people understand disease long before diagnosis and to show how everyday choices quietly shape long-term outcomes. Disclaimer: this content is for educational reference only and not medical advice. No doctor-patient relationship is created. You may share this summary freely, but it must not be altered or republished as your own. All rights belong to Gerald C.